Okay, so in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to build on what we saw last time. It's more about controlling the data that's being sent, different ways, either above, below, or on and off type switches, and also looking at ways of only allowing things to happen a couple of times. So if you've not watched the previous video, I suggest you start with that video because, as I say, this is going to build on that, and that was a bit of an introduction as to what we've done here. So the link to that is in the corner at the moment. And then if you have watched that one, let's jump into this one and show you what we're going to do. So the Node-RED flow is just here as it was before. I've just grouped it all up now so that it's a little bit easier to follow. But basically, we're going to have a look at two different things. So on the left-hand side here, we've got a way of setting things up. So do we want a series of data streams being sent as messages? So just a simple on and off to that. Do we want to trigger that if it's below a certain value, above a certain value, in between a range of values, in between a range of values with an on and off? And then this last one is similar to flow 5, but I'll come on to that, why that one is important in a second. These flows are built up here. So essentially it's the same data that's being sent out. It's just being added to each time. So what we'll do is we'll start at the very top flow here, and it's the items that you can see highlighted here in this group. So basically, all we're doing with this one is we're allowing you to turn the message flow on and off. It's as simple as that. We've got a little button here that sends out a true and a false. That then sets this gate up, this sort of like a switch, an on and off switch, so sending the information across. And then this is allowing this node to either send it or not send it, and that's all it does. So if I go over to Kip, you can see what it's doing and how it's presenting it just there. And if I turn the screen recording on my phone, if I then turn that flow on, what happens straight away is that we start to get the data, and it's just going to send that out until we turn that flow off. So as soon as we turn the flow off, the data output then stops. So that's simple as that, and you can see the on-off status there, and you can see that it's sending, and it's got a test here. So as you download these flows, you can do a test flow first, and then you can actually activate it, and you can then change this to whatever you want to subscribe to, and away it goes. So at the moment it's just using depth below transducer because that's just some data that I've got. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take that out of there, otherwise that one will carry on working, and I'm going to add it into here. So this one builds on what we've just seen a little bit. Just make sure we've got none of the others. Oh yeah, we've got that one set up. Let's just take those out of there as well. So this one builds on the first one, and instead of it being an on and off switch, it's initializing when the value is below a certain range. So let's say you wanted to know when the battery was getting low or something was happening, it went below a predefined value that you wanted, this one would then start to work. So we'll head over to Kip now, and we'll set that we only want to know when that value goes below 13. So you can see the value that's coming in on the right hand side, it's currently at 14.4. If that depth value drops below 14.4 and it drops to 12.4, then we'll start to get the messages. And you can see that those messages have now popped up on the screen. So if I go back up, 13.4, it'll stop sending them because that's the cutoff. The cutoff is 13, so actually one got through then. So back up to 14.4 now. If I start going back down, if I go back down to 1, jump right the way down there, it starts sending the message, and it's going to send them all the way up to 14. Sometimes 1 slips through, as you can see there, you've got 18.5 very, very quickly, but it will only send those values as it goes under the predefined threshold. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete these out because I'm using the same data, the incoming data for each one. So I need to send the whatever we've subscribed to through to format my message, and I also need to send it into the function as well so that we can see whether the value is below or above whatever we're trying to check, and that's all that's doing. So the next one, so now we're going to say only tell me value. So it's coming through at the moment because that's set really low, so let's move that up. So still 13, still okay. Let's move that up to 15. And the messages stop. So what we'll do now is we'll just increase it this side so you can actually see that happening again. So 15.5 messages are coming through. But as soon as that drops below, there we go, the messages have stopped. Now the next one works slightly differently. This one works when a value is in between a range. So the value has to be above a set level, but below another level. So we'll jump back across, and that's this function here. So we'll take those out of there because again, we're using the same data source. We'll just deploy that. Wait for Node-RED to come back. So this time I'm going to say that I only want the data to be seen between 8 and 10 meters. So we'll set the bottom one at 8, but it's got to be below 10. So there we go. So at the moment we're at 12.5 meters. So that's not going to come through, and we will drop that down. So as soon as we come below 10, we start getting the data coming through. Still okay at 8.5, but 7.5, one slip through again, but 7.5, the data then stops, and that's it now. It's triggered the gate, it's closed the gate, and the data is no longer allowed through. So that's how that one works. Now the next one is exactly the same as this, but it's also got an activate option. So this time we would set the value, and we would also have to turn on the activate. So I'm not going to run through that one, but you've basically got a mixture of turning things on and off, and also setting a value. Now you can see that that's copied again underneath. The difference with the one underneath is you might notice that that's actually, these have all reset, but this one hasn't, and we've been resetting Node-RED a little bit. The problem is that a lot of the data stored in here, a bit like Signal K, it doesn't stay. So if the Pi was to reboot, all of your config and your setup would disappear. So if you'd set those flows up and you hadn't put any predefined values, whether that's I want to see values below a certain range, above, in between, wherever it would be, that's going to reset. So if we take a look at this flow, you can see that I've started to write things into files again. And this way, when this one reboots, if the Pi was to reboot or Node-RED was to reset for whatever reason, that data, those sliders would reset to where I'd set them. So what we'll do this time is we will set them to 10 and 17, but notice that the flow is off at the moment, and I will then just go and reset it, and you'll notice that these will reset and these will stay where they are. So we also need to just take off these two routes here, put that back into there. You can see the data still coming in at 7.5 meters at the moment, so we're just going to reset that. And if you remember, those two values are 12 and 17. So let's just restart. We'll head back over. And if you just saw then, the sliders moved to 12 and 17, so that's preset, and also the on and off button's preset as well. So if you remember, data's still coming in at 7.5 meters. I'm going to put that up to 13.5 meters. But what will happen now is there will be no data coming through because we've not turned the flow on. No data at the moment. Let's activate the flow. And there's the data. So this one, 5 and 6 are exactly the same, but the difference with flow 6 is that the sliders and the settings, even if we restart it, let's go and restart it just to prove the point. Restart the flow. Obviously the data will stop during the restart because the flow isn't set up. But as it comes back in a second, you should see that everything reverts back, there we go, to 12, 17 and active, and the data now has started to come back through. So that one I think is probably the best setup, and I also think that it's just a case of which one of these you would want to pick. Do you want to send data when it's below a certain range or above a certain range? But I do think having the option to activate or deactivate the flow, and also saving those settings if your Raspberry Pi was to reboot, is probably the best way to go with this. Okay, so let's now take a look at this bottom bit here. So we've got this bilge counter that we showed before, and we've also got this lights enabled. So if we look at the bilge counter first, I did show this in the previous video. So with this, we could log whatever's coming in, so whether that be the bilge counter or something that's activating and counting up. A couple of different ways to do that. One way is to actually use a counter like this. In this example, I'm not doing that. I'm just allowing that data to come in. I'm simulating it actually. But we'll trigger it to 2. So as you can see, the bilge counter has been activated twice. And on the phone, If we message the boat /Allegra, then the boat will come back and we can look at bilge events, and we've got the bilge pumps run 2 times, which is there. And if I just reset the bilge counter, if I ask the same question again, then the bilge pump has run 0 times, so it's reset it. So if we just have a quick look at the code on that, as I say, what we're doing is we're sending a 0 value. So very simple, incoming value to the file, we set it, and we're just graphing that. And that's exactly what you can see here. You can see a button that resets it and a bilge counter that shows the number. So nothing overly complicated with that one. Now the bottom one, this light's enabled, as you can see the red lights just come on that. The idea behind that is that if I was going to trigger something, let's say I wanted to trigger a heater to come on a couple of times, or I wanted to trigger something else, but I was a bit concerned that if it ran so many times that it could impact something else. You could run out of diesel, you could lower the battery voltage, or if this setup went wrong, or potentially your bot got hacked, somebody could then activate that several times, one after another. With this option here, what I'm actually doing is I'm enabling that function. So I'm sending a 0 to this counter. And in this function here, what I'm doing is I'm looking at how many times that's been enabled. So we'll just go over here. I'll just turn the lights on. So as you can see, the LED light has just come on. I'm going to text it again and tell it to turn them off. I'm going to say once more, turn them on, please. And there they come on. And then I'm going to turn them off again. So what you can see now is that the red light's disappeared, and that's because this counter has reached 2. So you can see there's a 0 here. So if I try and turn the lights on again now, that doesn't come through. This has stayed to 0. This hasn't gone up. It will not activate. As soon as I reset that counter and enable that function again, then I can text it and the lights will come back on. So you could use that as a way of kind of arming the system. Or if you've got something, as I say, the only example I can really think about is like the heater. For example, you wanted to say, well, that heater can only run once, and then you have to be on the boat to kind of re-enable it to run a second time. That's potentially a way of doing that. And as long as you have a button there that resets the counter back to 0, then it's activated again, and then you can reactivate it from the app and recall the function. You'll note that there's nothing blocking the off side of this. So I'm always able to send the off command. It's just the on command that it restricts. So as you can see now, the lights are on and the counter's hit 2, so I can't turn it on again, but I can always turn it off. So what we'll do now is we'll just have a quick look at the features that we've gone through and how that's all set up. And then I'll leave these online and you can download them. So if we go back to the very beginning and we got the message gate here, as I say, this is very, very simple. It sends a true and a false out. This then looks for that and sets something called a flow. Now, from what I understand, things in Node-RED like that are functions that you can then call later on, and that's exactly what we're doing in this bit here. So we're calling this flow.gate_1, and if that is true, then we're allowing that signal K path to go through here, and this is just the function that you saw before. It's just looking for the value, and it's creating this message topic so that it can send that data out. The second example is similar. In this example, we are using a slider to set a value. In that value, we then again set a flow, and then this function looks for that flow and sets the gate. So using the same function but the other way around. And then when we get down to these here, these are getting a little bit more complicated. So these are looking for 2 set points and the values in between. So the set point must be above a certain range or below a certain range, and both of those have to be true before it will turn that gate on. This one's exactly the same, but it also now includes another AND function. So it's looking for values above and below, and if the switch is enabled. So the switch also sets a variable here that we then call in the function, which is that one there. This one is exactly the same as the one above, except this one has got the addition of the writing to the file. So not only does the function work the way that you saw previously, but what it also does here is it adds to a file. So we're telling that switch to write to active flow 6 as a name, and then on startup we're calling that file back. So that just sets a position of the switch. Same here, that 12 that's coming out of this slider goes down here into value above flow 6, which is just a file, and we then call that file on startup, so that moves the slider to 12. Same with this one, exactly the same, moving the slider to 17, and then those functions are then called as they were here. In this one, what we do here is we've got the counter included, so when we activate the switch, the counter is counting the amount of times that happens. Okay, so then this calls the message.count. So this is a variable that's called, and those are set as context, I believe, in here. So that's then called out of there, and then we can use that information to allow this gate. So it basically sets the gate up again, and there's the allow. So we then look exactly the same as we've done those on and off switches. We then allow that data to flow through, and if it isn't reset, then it doesn't allow the data to go through and to turn something on, to activate it. So you just have to make sure that that is reset. So I hope that's been useful. Got a few more practical examples of how to turn this into something useful next. So I'll upload that as another video, and we'll see you next time.